I was never a big fan of Walmart. Usually it's just a giant warehouse you could easily get lost in. And the customers often earn the really weird YouTube videos titled Walmart People. But every now and then I would drive up to the nearest Walmart on late evenings when my fridge would get empty and I wasn't sure what I wanted. This was one of those cases. A late fall Sunday night, I thought I'd walk down to the long Walmart aisles and clear my head a bit. But what happened was beyond any expectations. I must have gotten to the store at about 11 p.m. There were quite a few cars in the parking lot, but most of them were heading home, from what I could tell. I didn't mind that, as I usually enjoy a quiet store. I walked in and put some music on in my headphones. I usually like to listen to music when I browse aimlessly, although to be honest, I'm much more cautious about it now. Anyway, I was around the sweets section when I noticed a strange woman staring at me. She wasn't exactly tall, but she had something very intimidating about herself. She was covered in leather and heavy accessories, like chains and fur around her neck. First, I thought I was being paranoid, that maybe I was just imagining her staring at me, so I gave her a proper look and I froze. She was even closer to me now, and I could clearly see that she had a glass eye. She also had deep bags under her eyes, like she hadn't been sleeping for years. Her mouth was crooked and she had scars all over her forehead. I suddenly felt a knot in my stomach. I whispered, "Okay," and moved on to another aisle, hoping to escape her creepy fixation. I turned my music lower, wondering if it was because of the music that I didn't notice the woman earlier. I had no idea how long she had been following me. Was it all the way from the parking lot? I walked pretty quickly all the way to the frozen goods section. I figured I might as well continue with my shopping there and then walk back to the sweets and snacks as soon as I got rid of this shady woman. I actually thought she was gone for a minute, and I started filling my cart with fish fingers and frozen paella, all the while looking around me to make sure I wasn't being followed anymore. By now, I felt cold and tired, and I didn't want to be in Walmart anymore. I then got to the pet section and decided to get some food and toys for my cats. I overfilled my hands with stuff, so I dropped something. When I kneeled down to grab it, I saw her. I looked at her through the shelves without moving an inch. She was texting someone while muttering something unintelligible. Her voice was horrible, like something that came out of a nightmare. She wasn't looking at me. She might not have even been aware I was there, but I was pretty sure she knew where I was, and that she was still following me. But who was she texting? Was it all a bluff designed to make me think she'd given up on her obsession with me? Giving her a better look, I also noticed she had some pretty fresh scars on her arm. What was up with this woman? I picked up the food bag extra carefully so that I wouldn't make a sound. The last thing that I wanted was another episode of intense eye contact with her. I tiptoed toward the cashier, letting go of my plan to go back to the sweets section. By now, all I wanted was to get back home and take a long, hot shower. I was walking slowly down the aisle, but I was all alone and I could hear my own steps on the floor tiles. And with each step, my heart was pounding faster. Then, the worst happened. When I reached the clear space between the two pairs of aisles, I was violently pushed into a wall. I thought I was dreaming. It was all so fast that I didn't even have time to realize what was happening. But then I smelled a horrible alcohol stench and I opened my eyes and I saw her. She had one hand over my mouth to stop me from screaming, and the other hand went inside of her jacket to pull out a knife. She put its very cold edge on my throat and pressed just hard enough to make me feel like I was choking. I felt like I wanted to vomit, and my heart was pounding so fast that I was very dizzy. I had nowhere to look but straight into her mad eyes. Her glass eye was like a dead fisheye, and her normal eye was twitching like crazy. It was a truly horrifying thing to see. A face I will never forget, no matter how hard I try. "What's up, little girl? Are you afraid?" Her voice was hoarse and mean. When she pressed her knife even deeper into my skin, I started crying. "Of course I'm afraid. I just came here to shop. I don't know what you want from me," I squealed. My voice was trembling and weak, but I couldn't dare shout because I had a knife to my throat. "What do I want from you? You took something from me and I want you to give it back. Now! Now, or I take something from you." I had no idea what she was talking about. By now, I was sure I was going to die. I was thinking about my family, my friends, and the nicer moments we'd spent together. I was just crying softly and waiting for it to end. The woman took the tip of the knife and pushed it just under my jaw so that a little blood would come out. Right then, I heard a loud voice. "Hey, what are you doing there?" It was my colleague Stanley, who had seen the scene just in time. The woman immediately hid her knife and gave me a horrible, crooked smile as she turned to Stanley and said, "Nothing, just having a friendly chat." She disappeared between the aisles and left me there to catch my breath and ask myself what the heck had just happened. Stanley wanted to know if I was okay and if he should call the police, but I was in such a state of shock that all I wanted to do was get home as fast as I could. So I left my shopping cart there and ran out of the store towards my car. But I didn't make it past the second row of cars as a gang of bikers pulled me aside. There were 3 tall men with very serious faces, the kind no one wants to mess with. I was as scared as I was confused, and I felt extremely tired, like I could barely stand up anymore. How did I get into this situation? "Why are you messing with our sister?" one of them demanded to know. "What?" I reacted more to myself. I realized that they were the ones she was texting earlier. "Oh, that's your sister? Well, she followed me for an hour. Then she put a knife to my throat. All I did was try to escape her." The men looked at each other, trying to decide whether I was telling the truth or not. That's her! The woman shouted as she walked out of the store towards us. "That's the one who stole Winston. She needs to die." Wait, what? Just how crazy was she? "Excuse me?" I asked the men. "I didn't steal anything or anyone, and this is the first time I'm seeing this woman." One of the men sighed. "We know," he said. "We're sorry. We've had our dog stolen a week back, and ever since, Sarah has lost her mind. She's convinced she saw a woman steal Winston, but every day her story changes. One day, the perp is tall with red hair. The other day, she's short and blonde. She's just going through a rough time. She's been attacking a lot of women lately, but we just want to catch the real thief." The man's apology was a huge relief. By now, I knew I wasn't going to die. I was sure it wasn't the dog theft that made the woman lose her mind, but probably it was the last straw. Who knows what had happened to her in the past? But now I felt more pity than fear. It was a terrifying experience, the kind that kept me awake for months after. And I am certain that I'll be a little bit more careful on my visits to Walmart, if any. I was returning from a party with a bunch of friends when we thought we'd stop by Walmart and get some snacks for home. They were going to spend the night at my place, and it had been a long night, so we wanted to eat something before bed. In hindsight, we should have just stopped at a gas station. It would have been much smaller and much easier to navigate, but we were pretty intoxicated, and we thought it would be fun to have an overnight Walmart experience. Well, it proved to be just the opposite. As soon as we entered the store, there was an odd atmosphere. It might have been the alcohol, but something was definitely off. There was spilled milk on the floor, and there was a big group of people arguing in a corner. It looked like a customer was very upset about something, and a few shop attendants were trying to explain the situation, and a few other customers were escalating the situation by taking different sides in the conflict. There was a lot of noise in the store considering it was 3 a.m. One customer said something horrible to another. Then the latter raised his arms and pushed at least 10 jars on the ground, smashing them to pieces. Some of the shards jumped into people's legs, hurting them. I took a long, hard look at the man who did that. It was a scary sight. His eyes were red and bulging out of his head. I wondered if I had exaggerated things because I was under the influence, but it looked like the man was on some hard drugs. By now, people were screaming and looking at each other in horror. My friends and I looked at each other scared and confused and wondered what to do. We should have left the store right then and there, but being in the state that we were, we decided we were just going to avoid the brawl and get our snacks quickly. So we went to the snacks aisle and filled a basket with Cheetos and Pringles, and all of a sudden, I felt the urge to run to the restroom. I left my friends there and went to find the toilet. I must have been in there for less than 2 minutes, which makes the following even more unexplainable. I got out of the restroom and the store was empty. No one was arguing anymore, and I couldn't see any customers around me. I felt my stomach drop and my temperature decrease as I felt something really terrible had happened. I went to the snacks aisle quickly, hoping that at least my friends hadn't left, but I was out of luck. They were gone too. What was going on? How could the store have emptied in 2 minutes? I started questioning myself. Maybe I had had too much to drink, but I didn't feel sick, I just felt frightened because nothing made sense anymore. I called my friends, first quieter, then louder and louder, until I heard the desperation in my voice. No one answered, and all I could hear was the complete silence in the giant store that was never quiet. It was then that I heard it, a loud gunshot from the parking lot. Then another. Some people screamed, and then I could hear tires screeching. I realized there was nothing left for me to do but get out of the store as well. I had to see what was going on, and of course, I had to find my friends and make sure they were all right. But it was more bad news outside. In the parking lot, there were 2 people lying on the ground, unconscious, and a couple of people despairing next to them. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to come closer and see who it was. I peeked through the 2 other people, and I was shocked to see my friend Tom shot in the leg. He was bleeding hard and could hardly stay awake. The other person was a shop attendant, and he was shot so bad that I couldn't tell whether or not he was alive. I felt immediately sick and rushed to the side to puke. I looked around for my other 2 friends, Dennis and Alicia, and they were curled up on the sidewalk next to the store in shock. A few shop attendants were on a phone call with the police, trying to make them hurry to the horrifying scene. I went to my friends to comfort them and to find out the whole story. The dude with the jars started attacking the other guy. Then the shop attendant, Tom, stepped in to help them. He shot them, and then he took off in his car, Dennis said. It all escalated super quickly, said Alicia in a trembling voice. They took their fight from the store outside, and they shouted at each other until one of them pulled out a gun, and he didn't use it to shoot the man he was arguing with. He shot Tom, who was trying to help. I couldn't believe such a terrible thing could actually happen at a supermarket. All over some misunderstanding about groceries? It was as shocking as it was sad that people can go to such extreme lengths to prove their point in an argument. The police and the ambulance arrived a few minutes later. The police got statements from everyone and went on to track the killer. The ambulance took Tom and the other person to the hospital, and we followed. I don't know about the fate of the shop attendant, but luckily Tom was going to be all right. Needless to say, my friends and I were shook up. We were relieved that it was all over and the police didn't catch us in a DUI. We spent the night at the hospital to be there for Tom when he woke up. After that night, I promised myself I would never go drunk shopping at Walmart again, nor would I try to be a hero when I saw crazy people fighting. I was in my 3rd year of college and I was working late night shifts at Walmart to put some money aside to pay my student loan. This was a 24/7 Walmart somewhere close to Washington, D.C. During the time I worked there, it rained pretty much every night, and as the store was usually getting pretty empty at night, it was quite depressing. But I guess I should have been grateful for all the quiet nights, because one night, it got truly terrifying. It was about 2 a.m. Because I had no customers, I went to replenish the stocks around the clothing section. First, I had to put quite a lot of clothes back on the racks and hangers. It's amazing how inconsiderate some customers can be. So I was picking some coats off the floor when I noticed a person standing really close to me. All I could see were his old, ragged boots. I stood up and looked right at him. He was a middle-aged man with sunken eyes and stubble, the kind that's been left to grow out of laziness, not a love for fashion. What was even scarier was that he wasn't wearing any pants, just a long black coat down to his knees. "May I help you?" I asked with a faint smile. His wrinkly mouth morphed into a giant Cheshire cat-like smile that creeped me out. I waited for an answer for at least a minute, a very awkward minute, as I stared at him and he stared back at me. But he didn't say anything, and in a very scary way, he continued to smile as he just took off. He walked away from me without saying a single word. Honestly, I felt terrified. What kind of person just smiles at you like that for a whole minute without replying to your question? I carried on with my business, trying to concentrate on the clothes and to forget what had just happened. When I finished tidying up, I went in the back to get some carts with fresh products. When I walked back into the main store, my heart stopped. It was the same man, this time standing right in front of the doors I had just come through. Once more, he had this really creepy smile on his face and was looking straight at me, like he'd been waiting for me there. I had nowhere to go as he was blocking my way, so I froze there for a second until I could gather my thoughts. It was then that he started unbuttoning his coat. I felt like I was gonna be sick. I left the carts there and ran to find a colleague who could help me. I found Jim, who was cleaning the shelves at the canned goods aisle. I told him I needed his help, pretty urgently. I think this really creepy guy is following me. I think he might be an exhibitionist, and I don't know what to do. I had never been in a similar situation before, and I was never big on confronting people. So confronting this horrible man who is much taller and bigger than me was pretty much out of the question. Jim was pretty horrified by the situation, so he asked me to help him clean the shelves. That way, we'd stick together, and if the guy appeared again, we would confront him as a team. An hour must have passed like this, me working side by side with Jim and hoping the creepy man would leave, seeing that I wasn't alone anymore. When I looked at the time and saw how late it was, I became pretty sure he'd left. I heard a colleague call for a cashier at the register, so I went there and left Jim with the cleaning duties. As I got closer to the registers, I froze. The customer waiting there was exactly the creepy man I was trying to avoid. He heard me stop and turned towards me. It was the worst eye contact of my life. I was so scared, and I'm sure he could sense it. I had two options: run back to Jim or to any colleague who could help me confront this man, or go on and serve this customer, hoping that if it got really weird, I could call Jim. Also, there were security cameras pointing towards the registers, so if anything happened, I would have him on tape for the police to see. I decided to face my fears and go to the register. The man put his products on the counter: a measuring tape and a Coke. He had spent the last hour and a half in the store, and this was all he was buying? Something was off, but to be honest, I was too afraid to ask. I simply scanned his products and told him the price. He reached in his pocket and took out the oldest $10 bill I'd ever seen. He handed it to me with a slow movement, looked me in the eyes with a smile, and whispered, "Keep the change." With those words, he left, with the same Cheshire cat face that will be haunting me for months. I will never understand what really happened that night, who that man was, and just how bad his intentions were. In any case, he was creepy enough that I switched to daytime shifts the very next day. And to all of you who might be working overnight shifts at big stores, stay safe out there. This brings us to the end of the video. I surely hope you enjoyed our stories. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, and if you'd like more bone-chilling stories delivered to your homepage, make sure you subscribe to the channel.